months now and been working in Marketo for a few years. I also grew up in Florida and now I live in Chicago and I'm very cold most of the year round. So I definitely feel you guys. I think, yeah, and I just wanted to get a quick sense. How many people here have are on the new UI? You could just raise your hands. And then, okay, so I guess Kim and Dave, you guys are not yet. All right, awesome. So let me go ahead and just share my screen. Also, if you have questions at any time, shout them out, type them in, no formalities here. So, all right, you guys can see my screen? Perfection. No, that's the wrong button. All right, yeah, so campaign operations, MCE, design nerd, which will be relevant fairly quickly. And then today, we're talking about what is officially called the MU, which stands for the Marketo Engage Unified Experience, which most of us just call the new UI because that's simpler. And you know, if they ever need a mascot, I think this is my suggestion, but you know, we'll see what Adobe thinks. And I think to get started, the new UI has inspired a lot of feelings. Across the Marketo community, lots of people have lots of different thoughts about it. And I think if there's one thing that you guys can sort of walk away from all of this, is that it's just gonna take time to get acclimated because we Marketo pros, the more we use it, we have this great autopilot about we know where to go, we know what to click on, our brains really work a certain way. And now all of that is just not very helpful anymore. And I'll go into a little bit why. And I think this is just a great time to just, you know, be kind to yourself, be nice to yourself, give yourself the time, take time to poke around, and just sort of learn what all the new features and the looks are. So to get just to sort of, for the two of you who have not yet gotten flipped, based on the commentary that we've heard in the Mops Pros community, your CSM may or may not give you a heads up, and then that heads up may or may not be correct. We've definitely heard cases of people being given a date and then they're not flipped on that date or they're flipped before the date. So I would just get that conversation started. You'll at least get some data, some information. And what we also do know from a reliable source is that if you have multiple workspaces, you are getting pushed to last. So towards the end of that Jan 2021 window, because the current interface as it exists does not support multiple workspaces. So if you have those, you're safe for a little bit longer. So first up, we're just gonna talk about the visuals of it, just how it looks in the first place. And to do that, I'm gonna give you a little bit of design history. So previously, the design was what's called skeuomorphic design. And what this means is that the icons looked like the things they were. So you can think of this as the floppy disk icon being used to represent save, because that's how you save things in the past. The delete icon looking like the trash can. And in Marketo's case, you know, the email program was literally a mailbox. Programs were literally a file folder because that's just used to house things. Now, in Marketo's case, what this meant was that everything was very distinctive and very visually informative. You could look at things and get a lot of information out of it right away. But with their acquisition by Adobe, Marketo had to sort of get with the times, get with Adobe's design standard, and you know, now have this flat design. Now, skeuomorphic design is something that's very early mid 2000s. It's kind of one of the reasons that if you've ever looked at Marketo and thought this looks a little dated, that's probably why, because so much of design has just moved past that. If you look at an older iOS, for example, versus the current iOS, you'll see some of that same shift. So Marketo, now owned by Adobe, has to join the new era. That means flat design. So everything is now much more uniform, much more sort of designy, I would say. But in the process, we have actually just lost a lot of visual information and cues. And I think that's what, when people really struggle with it, that's, I think, a huge component of what they're struggling with. So we're just gonna hop into an instance here and kind of give you guys a tour. So when you log in, this is what you're gonna see right away. As you can see, I've been building out a few things just to showcase here. The first thing I'd like to highlight is that this UI, the entire software right now, is still, I'm gonna call it halvesies, where there are gonna be bits which are clearly still on the old styling, and then there are pieces that are clearly on the new styling. And you'll see this as we go through as well. So you'll see that also a lot of like the color has been stripped out of here. It's all very gray now. When you roll over it, you do get some of that color back. And then here you can see on this side that they've still kept some of that old styling. Now I'm just going to go into activities, and here now you'll see kind of the flip. And this is where what the style is right now for the most part, where you've got a lot of the older styling on the right side here. And then your marketing activities tree and this top menu is in the new UI style. So let's go under here. And I have opened up, I've just basically made examples of all of the things that we can just take a look at quickly here. And I think as you'll notice as we're sort of scrolling through this is that it's a lot of gray boxes and circles. And that's kind of a lot of gray boxes, a lot of circles, and a lot of yellow and green circles. So when you're looking through this, it's gonna look very similar, and it's just gonna look very similar. And design-wise, it's like supposed to be cohesive and, you know, not as like in your face anymore. But we've definitely lost a lot of that visual language. And then, I think the two main helpful suggestions that I have right now is that really double check that you're doing the right action to the right asset in the right location, just like kind of orient yourself. And then using the tooltips, which I think are definitely a handy new feature here. So for example, the green dots on an asset are approved, approved with draft, and draft. Whereas on a smart campaign, it has run and it's scheduled, versus here it's an active trigger and campaign is requested. So that'll definitely help you figure out a little bit of what's going on. Also in the case of these email send programs where the icons are really tiny, the tooltips will help you sort of distinguish between the waiting to run, between the completed. Again, here, it'll help you sort of to know that it's scheduled to run as well. I think the other thing I want to note is that I think this happened a little bit with the previous one as well. I've just been noticing a little bit more in that if something is scheduled and then you come back to it, you're going to have to click it for it to load into a either completed or has run. I think in the previous one, it sometimes did it and sometimes didn't. Here, I've fairly consistently noticed that it just doesn't auto update. So save yourself a heart attack and just click into it first to see if it's actually gone through or not. And then the same thing here, has run, no upcoming. It will automatically switch to the status, even if it's a batch that's like in progress of running. So just, you know, check into the status to make sure that it is what you think it is. And then you'll notice that the light bulb is now only for smart campaigns that are a batch, whereas the trigger has this different like little lightning circle. So, and then, yeah, actually, let me point out one other thing. Engagements, the on has a green circle, off has no circle, doesn't have a draft circle. And then we got little archive folders, archives, folders, and programs and emails are all sort of a little bit similar looking. But those are the main sort of visual changes here that I've pulled the most common icons. I think there's a few other smaller ones that we can take a look at later if people are interested. Then let's go back here. That was most of the visual changes. Then I'm just going to talk a little bit about the functionality that has adjusted. The marketing activities tree is definitely something that has been a little challenging. We're going to hop back in there a second, but the default size for most instances has been a little too small, if just given how folders are typically named. And if you resize it, it will reset when you log out. And if it gets small, if it gets too small, we've also heard about it getting stuck at the too small side. Thankfully, someone in the MOPS Pros community has developed this extension, which is pretty cool. Which, let me just show you here. So this is the default sort of width of it. And then I can, ooh, hello. I can definitely expand it out, which helps you see a lot more of what's going on. But the minute the page refreshes, it's gonna snap back, which is really annoying. But then here is the extension, Marketo Chrome extension by Adrian. There is a link at the end of the deck, and I can also, Amanda can send out that link later. What that extension does, if I toggle it on. This might take 1 or 2 refreshes to get it to work. Okay, so what it does is, as you can see, my size is now locked in. And the other thing it's done is that it's added a little bit of color back in. So instead of your item being selected in the gray color, which kind of made it blend in, the selection is now in purple, which helps a lot with just orienting yourself and making sure you know where you are when you're working through it. So really helpful extension. And I know he's working on some updates for it as well. Next is drag and drop, which has also been much mourned and much missed. What's really interesting is that drag and drop was not compatible with the World Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And what that means is that if you are somebody who is accessing the web through like a reader or any type of like accessibility device, drag and drop did not work for you. So in order to make Marketo more accessible for users with disabilities of any sort, they prioritize the move action with instead of like putting drag and drop back. So they took out drag and drop, they put in move, and then hopefully towards the end, in sometime in the first half of 2021, they will be reintroducing drag and drop for the rest of us. So fingers crossed. And the one thing, let's just take a look at the move action here. There's a couple of small things that are interesting and worth noting. So in order to move something within folders, you're just gonna right click here on the asset and you're just gonna go to move. And then sorry, I don't have any folders in here, but it will give you the folders of the program you're in. Now, there is the move option here. There is also the move option under the asset here. This is a different move. This is moving it between Design Studio and marketing activities, and then within folders and programs as such. This is within the folders of the program itself. The other thing is that with drag and drop gone, is there a good example for me here? Did not, yes, I did. So when you create a new asset now, what's really great is that if you click on the folder you want it in, and you go new local asset, smart campaign, test, it will automatically go into the folder that you've clicked it in. Super helpful. However, if you are ever cloning an asset, it will not do that. And then you will need to go in, move it to the right location. So small nuance worth noting. Did I click on the right folder? Maybe I sent it somewhere else. I will find that in a bit, but small nuance worth noting as you are moving and cloning things around. But all in all, I think the biggest thing to walk away is that fingers crossed, drag and drop is not gone forever, and we will have it back some point in the future. Next, your pod number is no longer in your URL. Instead, it has been replaced by your Munchkin ID. If you still need your pod number in order to look up any errors or whatnot, you can find it while you are editing any of your landing pages, forms, or emails. In the future, it will also be available in the admin section somewhere, but that has not been rolled out yet. Next, sorting symbols. The tilde or the squiggly, which I think a lot of folks use to push their folders to the bottom, no longer works. The underscore is now the way to go. A little bit of interesting side history is that the tilde in like software development, the software development world, is not actually supposed to be what pushes things to the bottom. That was something custom that Marketo did. And now they've had to like get back in line with like regular software development practices. So what we have verified is that order I have listed here works with a standard US keyboard. And I say a standard US keyboard because we have not tested it with things like Cyrillic characters, kanji characters, currency symbols that are not the $, all of that stuff. If you're using those, I would definitely do some testing on your own. But this order works. We have found that it works really great if you're using a standard US keyboard. Then the top nav shuffle, as you all have noticed, and we're going to hop back in a second. The great big super wall is now gone, and they've spread out everything across that top nav bar. The community section is a little bit more hidden now, which is definitely a little sad because that's, you know, one of my favorite parts of Marketo. And then the other thing worth noting is that additional modules like SEO do not appear in the top nav anymore. So if you want to access those, you're going to have to go back to your My Marketo and access it through there. And then global search and design studio. Let's go here. So global search is definitely one of those pretty cool things. There's not much in this instance. It's just a test one. So not going to pop up too much, but what I think is super cool is like they have so many more new options under the search here. So type in anything, and then you have all these really great filters to really dig into what you're looking for. I recently had to clean up some emails for a client, and this was a great way for me to find exactly what I was looking for within the instance. So this I'm definitely super excited about. And I know this was one of those things that I think early on it was a little bit buggy, but they have since resolved it. And then for the design studio, what they've done here is they've just alphabetized the folders, and they have broken out landing page templates and landing pages, email templates and emails. Good for us, good for them, question mark. I think the only thing really to note here is that just like be careful where you're clicking, and just I have spent so much time looking for images and files where it does not exist. And then lastly, just to wrap it up, here is what Marketo, what we know that they have planned for the future. Going forward, they are going to try to bring the entire software to the new interface. So you can see here, for example, a nurture program has that new design, the new flat design. And then they will also be introducing a toggle to sort of switch between the experiences. So you can just expect more of this kind of design, but then also the option to at least toggle this section back and forth. Then it also looks like they're definitely taking some of the features that they've promised over the years for Marketo Sky and like rolling it out to through the new UI. So I definitely think it'll be interesting to see what like if and when these come to fruition and what these features end up looking like. But with that, that is the high level tour that I've got. What questions can I help answer? Oh, and then at the end of this, some tips and tricks. This is from Kimberly. I've also got their official announcement blog post, their official overview doc. They have a feedback page for the new UI, which you can also access from up here from this big blue button. It's a real fun read. And then a little bit of background reading on skeuomorphic design if you are interested.
Alysha, yeah, I put the link to the Chrome extension in chat as well, so you can access it there. I'll stop recording and we can go through questions and thoughts and all that good stuff.